May I start by saying that I'm loving the book, and I am recommending the book like crazy, and just really getting a lot of traction. So the first question I've got is tell us about the tartan blanket.
The tartan drape. My first experience with congregational change. Went out to work with a new church development congregation, 11 people, meeting in a funeral home chapel. And the pulpit, when I arrived, the pulpit totally engulfed with a tartan cloth. Totally engulfed. Which was a bit of a surprise. I'd never seen that before. And inquiring into why it was there, I learned that in a previous meeting place, they had a piano with its back exposed, which was deemed unsightly. And so a large piece of tartan cloth was made as a drape to cover the back of the piano. And when they moved from that place to the funeral home chapel, they no longer had the need to put on a piano, but they had this history of putting it out become a symbol for them. It was meaningful. And they had to decide what to do with it now. And they thought, well, let's put it on the pulpit. And it covered the pulpit from top to floor, right around. And I tried to, from my perspective, tried to convince them out of the motives I had to get rid of the thing. And they politely said no. I said, it no longer has its original practical use. And they basically nicely said, but that doesn't matter. I talked to them about how this might be a turnoff to people coming as potential members who may not have a Scottish background, that it won't be meaningful to them. And the congregants nicely said, but it's meaningful to us.
A colleague of mine was preaching at a church a couple of years ago, and it came to the time of the Apostles' Creed, and as one, the entire congregation got up, turned around, faced the back of the church, and recited the Apostles' Creed. So after church, he talks to the minister and he said, could you help me understand that? And the minister said, well, we had this woman, one of the real saints of the church, had made this huge hooked rug Apostles' Creed, and we put it on the back wall of the church so everybody would turn around and do it. And this became doubly important when she died. And my friend said, well, that's great. He said, but there's no hooked rug on the back of the church.
Yeah.
And the minister said, well, yeah, funny about that. He said, we had to take the rug out to be cleaned, and it disintegrated. And my friend said, well, when was that? And the minister said, 20 years ago. So for 20 years, the congregation has been standing up, turning around, facing a hanging that no longer exists.
Yeah.
That kind of change, sometimes it just takes external eyes to be able to say, guys, this one's a little bit crazy,
The two things I learned from that was that simply speaking out of my frame of reference around why I was motivated to do things doesn't necessarily touch the hearts of people because their frame of reference could be very different. The second thing I learned is that there was no readiness for change, and you have to actually begin to foster that.
Are there common motivational mistakes?
Oh, sure. So not having a readiness for change is a big one, that congregations aren't actually prepared in different ways to change, to have a sense of confidence that they can do something new. Often people think that just having a compelling vision, leadership books often suggest that a compelling vision is what's most needed. In fact, as a broad generalization, 30% of motivation arises from intention. The other 70% from belief in our capacity to make the change. Can we do it? So that's actually more important than in motivating people in the vision itself. Not taking the motives of congregants seriously, as the story of the tartan cloth talks about, is a real issue. And so leaders often speak out of their motivation and why they're motivated, rather than trying to speak to the motives in the hearts of those that they wish to lead.
One of the things that is really important in my work right now is helping congregations understand that the road that we are on is no longer a viable road, right? That if we just sort of keep doing what we're doing, that's okay, or that, if we keep doing what we're doing, that things are going to get better. They're not. And so for most congregations, the reality is if they stay on the road that they are on, we're talking about not just the possibility, but the probability that they will not last this generation.
Part of the dilemma churches get in is once they perceive a need to change, they can quickly find themselves stuck. And in organization psychology, they talk about the tension between survival anxiety and learning anxiety. And so survival anxiety arises when people begin to realize we have to change. Often they cast that as we have to change or else. And a lot of churches think that way. We have to change or else. And that provides a lot of compelling motivation to move forward. But immediately when you say we have to change, the problem often pops up. What kind of church do we need to be? What can we do? And it's hard for congregations to think outside their own box. And that creates what's called learning anxiety. We don't know what to do. We have to change, but we don't know how to change or what to change into. And these two things push against each other and becomes a barrier. So what you have to do is to reduce the learning anxiety. And that's best done by raising up some learning goals. So if a congregation begins to think about moving in a new direction, it's often helpful not to put up right away some goals to pursue, but to take a little time to actually learn something about the direction you want to go in, because it will actually, taking that time in the short run actually makes change happen faster in the long run. Every generation of church is entrusted with the gospel for the sake of the kingdom of God, and we are to live it and then pass it on well to the generation that follows us. And thus it has been for generations since four fishermen answered Jesus' invitation to follow him. And then all of a sudden the game changed on the church. And that has really discombobulated the church. But I think part of it is understanding that God is on God's mission, the Missio Dei, and our role is to figure out how that seems to be unfolding in God's time here and now, and how do we get on board with that.
Peter, I'm loving the book, and thank you for writing.